Imagine, ringing in the new year, but instead of fireworks and champagne, you're suddenly plunged into darkness.
Yeah, sounds pretty eerie.
Well, that's exactly what happened in Puerto Rico this New Year's Eve.
A massive blackout swept across the island.
Yeah, it left over 1.3 million people without electricity.
Almost 90% of the population.
I mean, can you imagine that?
It's hard to even fathom the scale of the disruption.
And we've got a ton of sources to help us understand what happened. Reports from AP News, CNN, FOX35 Orlando.
Even RNZ News from all the way over New Zealand picked up the story.
It seems like the whole world is talking about this blackout, but, in this deep dive, we're not just going to stick to the surface.
Right, we're going to go deeper, look beyond the headlines, and really try to understand the root causes of this blackout and what it means for Puerto Rico.
Because this isn't just a one-time event.
Puerto Rico has a long and troubled history with its power grid.
Yeah, and this blackout is just the latest chapter in that story.
A pretty dramatic one at that.
So let's start by painting a picture of what it was actually like on the ground that night.
Okay, so picture this. The clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve.
And suddenly everything goes dark.
Appliances shut down, air conditioners go quiet.
And instead of the sounds of celebration, there's this eerie silence.
A sense of shock and disbelief.
Yeah, the AP News report talks about people just standing around in the dark wondering what just happened.
Some folks thought it was just their neighborhood or their building.
But then they realize it's the entire island.
And for some people, it was more than just inconvenience.
Like Manuel, whose birthday just happened to be on December 31st.
What a way to celebrate turning another year older.
Right. The AP News report mentions that he told them he just felt heartbroken because he couldn't have the party he planned.
And then there's the story of Raul Pacheco, a 63-year-old diabetic who told AP News he was planning to sleep on his balcony because of the heat.
It's just really heartbreaking to think about people, especially those who are vulnerable, being stuck in that situation.
Absolutely. And you also have stories of workers scrambling to check on bedridden patients and families trying to keep insulin cold for their loved ones.
And the impact went way beyond individuals, too.
Businesses were forced to close.
Parks and malls shut down.
Even government services were limited.
It really highlights how much we rely on electricity for literally every aspect of modern life.
Yeah, without it, everything just grinds to a halt.
So let's talk about what actually caused this domino effect.
Okay, well, LUMA Energy, the company that's responsible for power transmission and distribution in Puerto Rico, says the likely culprit is a failed underground power line.
So like a tripped circuit breaker on a massive scale?
Basically, but they're still investigating the exact cause.
And this is where things get a bit complicated because, we talk about Puerto Rico's power grid, but it's not just one single entity.
Right, it's actually a whole network of different companies and organizations.
So you've got LUMA, which we just mentioned, but then there's also Genera PR, which is the company that actually generates the electricity.
And on top of that, you still have the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, or PREPA, which is actually still struggling to recover from billions of dollars in debt.
It sounds like a pretty messy situation.
Yeah, it's been a challenge for years, and this latest blackout just adds another layer of complexity.
So we've got this whole web of companies involved in keeping the lights on in Puerto Rico, and one of them, LUMA, says a failed power line is probably to blame.
That's what they're saying, but,
Yeah.
This isn't the first time Puerto Rico has faced major power problems.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Haven't there been other issues with the power grid in the past?
Oh, absolutely. This New Year's Eve blackout wasn't just some random one-off event.
Like a fluke or something?
Right. It's actually part of a much larger pattern of instability and unreliability in Puerto Rico's power system.
Okay, so we can't really talk about this blackout without talking about Hurricane Maria back in 2017.
Definitely, Maria was a devastating event for the whole island, and it really exposed how fragile the existing power infrastructure was.
I mean, the island was literally in the dark for months after that hurricane.
And it caused what some experts have called the largest blackout in U.S. history in terms of the total hours of electricity lost.
That's insane. And despite the fact that billions of dollars in aid from FEMA poured into the island to help rebuild,
It's clear that the grid is still incredibly vulnerable.
yeah, we saw that just last August after Hurricane Ernesto.
Right, about half the island lost power, according to LUMA.
So even relatively minor storms can still have a huge impact on the grid. So even with all the time that's passed and all the money that's been spent, the situation hasn't really improved all that much.
Not really, and that begs the question, why is the grid still so fragile?
Yeah.
What are the underlying causes here?
Yeah, why is Puerto Rico's power grid so susceptible to these disruptions?
Well, one of the key factors is the age of the power plants themselves.
Okay, so like outdated technology.
Exactly. Many of them are decades old, and heavily reliant on petroleum.
Okay, so we've got aging infrastructure, A&D reliance on a fuel source that's not exactly known for being stable.
Right, both in terms of price and from an environmental perspective.
Not a great combination.
Not at all. And this brings us to another crucial point: the slow adoption of renewable energy sources in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, you'd think an island with that much sunshine would be a prime location for solar power.
You would think, but the sources say that solar rooftops only account for about 7% of the island's electricity consumption.
So what's the holdup? What are the barriers to going solar in Puerto Rico?
It's complicated. There have been efforts to promote solar, but they haven't really taken off.
Like they haven't really gained traction.
Yeah, and some experts suggest it's a bunch of different factors. Economic challenges,
Yeah, I bet that played a big role.
regulatory hurdles, lack of public awareness.
So people don't really understand the benefits of solar.
Right, and there's even been some speculation about potential resistance from, those who benefit from the status quo.
Those who have a vested interest in keeping things the way they are.
Exactly.
Makes sense. But let's shift gears for a second and talk about the immediate aftermath of the blackout.
Okay.
How did people react? What was the public response?
Well, as you might expect, there was a lot of frustration.
Yeah, I can imagine people were pretty upset.
Anger, particularly directed at EveA and Genera PR.
It was New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
People had plans, celebrations, all disrupted.
For sure, and for many, this blackout felt like a breaking point.
Like they'd just had enough.
They've been dealing with this unreliable power grid for years.
And this was the final straw?
Absolutely, it just added fuel to the fire.
And the sources mention calls for EveA and Genera PR to be held accountable, even calls for their ouster.
Yeah, there's a real sense that people want to see some heads roll.
It sounds like this blackout really galvanized public opinion against those companies.
Oh, definitely. And all this public pressure is starting to have some political repercussions, too.
Really? How so?
Well, the incoming governor, Jennifer Gonzalez Colon, has made it clear that addressing Puerto Rico's energy crisis is a top priority for her administration.
So she's taking it seriously.
Oh, yeah. She's even called for the appointment of an energy czar to oversee the situation.
An energy czar? Wow, that sounds pretty intense.
Right. It signals that she's not messing around.
So what would this energy czar actually do?
Well, from what I've read, they'd be responsible for conducting a thorough review of Olome's performance.
So basically like an audit.
Yeah. And they'd also potentially explore the possibility of bringing in a new operator for the power grid.
So Olome might actually be replaced.
Up on the table. And it's not just the incoming governor either.
Yeah.
Current Governor Pedro Pierluisi has also been pretty vocal about demanding answers and solutions.
So there's pressure from both sides.
Definitely.
So we've got political pressure from both sides of the aisle, mounting public anger, a sense that the status quo is simply unacceptable.
It's a pretty good summary of where things stand.
And it's interesting to think about how this specific event, this New Year's Eve blackout, fits into the bigger picture of Puerto Rico's energy struggles.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the immediate aftermath, the inconvenience, the frustration.
But this blackout is not an isolated incident.
It's a symptom of a much deeper problem.
And a problem that's been going on for a long time.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this event so significant.
It's like a wake-up call.
Maybe so.
You mentioned earlier that Hurricane Maria was a turning point, and I'm wondering if maybe this blackout could be another one.
Interesting question. Could this be the event that finally forces real lasting change?
I guess only time will tell.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, I think it's too early to say for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of hope and optimism, but also a healthy dose of skepticism.
Because we've seen this before, haven't we? Promises of reform, pledges of investment.
And then things just kind of fizzle out.
Right. So I think the real test will be what happens next.
Action speaks louder than words.
Will this momentum for change translate into concrete action? Will we see a real commitment to modernizing the grid, embracing renewable energy, creating a more resilient and sustainable energy future for Puerto Rico?
So what can people do if someone's listening to this thinking, wow, this is a really important issue, but feeling a little helpless? What would you say to them?
Well, I think the most important thing is to stay informed.
Don't just tune it out.
Right. Stay engaged.
Yeah.
This is a story that's still unfolding.
Things are still developing.
Exactly. And the choices that are made in the coming weeks and months will have a lasting impact.
So we need to pay attention and hold our leaders accountable.
Absolutely. Because this isn't just about keeping the lights on in Puerto Rico.
It's about something much bigger.
It's about creating a more just and sustainable energy future for everyone.
You know, it's interesting. We started by talking about this very specific event, this New Year's Eve blackout.
Yeah.
But this conversation has really broadened to encompass some much larger issues.
It's true. The situation in Puerto Rico is kind of a microcosm of challenges faced by communities all over the world.
Especially as we're all trying to figure out how to transition to cleaner energy sources.
Right, and how to deal with aging infrastructure.
Yeah, those are global issues for sure.
Yeah.
But I keep coming back to this question.
What's that?
Do you really think this blackout could be a turning point for Puerto Rico?
It's hard to say.
Could this be the catalyst that finally pushes the island toward a more sustainable energy future?
There's definitely potential for that.
Yeah.
This event has really brought the issue to the forefront.
It's gotten people talking.
Exactly. And it's put pressure on leaders to take action, but real change, it requires sustained effort.
And a long-term vision.
Exactly.
So what would that vision look like? If you could wave a magic wand and create a truly resilient and sustainable energy system for Puerto Rico, what would be the key elements?
Oh, wow. Well, first and foremost, I think you'd need a modernized grid.
Okay.
One that's capable of integrating renewable energy sources seamlessly.
So not just about distributing power, but managing it intelligently.
Exactly, with robust storage solutions and the ability to adapt to fluctuations in supply and demand.
We've talked a lot about solar energy, but what other renewable options might be viable for Puerto Rico?
Well, the island has incredible potential for wind energy, particularly offshore wind farms.
Interesting.
And then there's ocean energy, utilizing wave and tidal power.
Oh, wow, I hadn't even thought about that.
And let's not forget about geothermal energy, tapping into the Earth's heat.
So many possibilities.
Exciting to think about.
It is. But how do we actually go from potential to reality? What are the next steps?
Well, I think it's going to require a multi-pronged approach, investing in research and development,
Okay.
creating policies that incentivize renewable energy adoption, and educating the public about the benefits of a cleaner energy future.
It's a team effort.
Absolutely, involving government, industry, and individuals.
And it sounds like it's about more than just technology.
Right, it's about shifting mindsets.
Embracing a new way of thinking about energy.
It's exactly moving away from this centralized fossil fuel dependent model to a more decentralized, diversified system.
One that empowers communities and prioritizes sustainability.
Exactly.
This whole conversation has been incredibly insightful, but as we wrap up, I want to circle back to our listener.
Okay.
If they were to take away just one key insight from this deep dive into Puerto Rico's energy challenges, what would it be?
I think the most important takeaway is that this is not just a Puerto Rican issue.
It's a global one.
Right. We're all interconnected.
Right.
And the choices we make about energy, they have far-reaching consequences.
Whether it's climate change, energy security, or simply making sure everyone has access to reliable power.
These are things we all need to be thinking about and engaging with.
So it's a call to action for all of us to be more informed, more engaged, and more proactive in shaping a more sustainable energy future.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately, it's not just about keeping the lights on.
It's about creating a brighter future for everyone.